In our previous video, we created a website that talked to a database, a back-end database. Now, we used MAMP to run essentially a virtual database on our local machine, so a local host of a database. And then we created a couple of web pages using PHP that could communicate with that database back and forward. Now, the only thing that we did is we added data to the database and then we could view what was there. But in reality, to manipulate a database correctly, you need to be following a basic set of instructions, a basic set of rules or techniques that are true database concepts. Now, the first of those, we follow the headings of CRUD, C-R-U-D. Now, we want to be able to create and add data, right, which is an insert, which we've already done. We did that. We added data to our current database. We also want to be able to do a select, which we did. We retrieved some data and we viewed that data. Now, we didn't put any specifications on it. We just retrieved essentially all of the data. Now, you can manipulate that a little bit further, but at this stage, we've done the read section. Now, what we didn't do was the update, where we could change data that was already in the database. So we put something in and we decide it needs to be changed. We need to be able to change that database. So that's an update. And the next one is delete. If someone wants to remove something from the database, we need to be able to do that. In addition to that, there are two extras. And first one is aggregation, which essentially is using the data or analyzing the data to find out some information. For example, summing things up or counting how many times something happens, getting an average, a minimum or a maximum from the database, right? So that's another element that you need to be able to do. And finally is to join. So if we've got two different tables, so we've got one database, two tables, you need to be able to find information from both tables and join that together, kind of like the intersection of a Venn diagram. You need to be able to find where there's information on two different tables that work together. So these are the concepts that we're going to be working on today in this video. We're going to be creating 5 new files to add to our current website-based database communication. We also did one with Python. That'll be a different video. This video is just on the web side of it, right? So we're going to do this web-based. So let's start with the first thing we need to do, because we're doing this join one, which essentially looks at two tables, we need to have two tables. So let's go and have a look at what we've currently got. If I go to phpMyAdmin, now again, we're running this through MAMP and you need to watch the previous videos to know where we are. We've got a database here called car database, and it has one table in it that's got cars in it. And if I click on that, you can see there's 7 bits of data that we used from our previous video that's in this one single table. But I want to have two tables. So this one has the types of cars in it, and I might have a separate table that has who owns these cars, who is the owner, and what's their personal details and information and those sorts of things. So we can have a separate table inside this main car database that is the owners. Now, to do that, I've created a file in a SQL file in brackets, same as we did in our previous video. And this creates our second table. So we say create table, and we're going to call it owners. It has its own ID, its own individual primary key ID, which is a number, an integer, and it auto increments. That means it goes up, it counts up as you enter more data automatically. It has a field called name, which has variable characters up to 50 characters. So the person who owns the car's name can be 50 characters long. And it has car ID int, which essentially is going to link the owner of the car to which car they own from the other table. So that car ID int is going to be essentially a link between table 1 and table 2. Now, as we get more into databases, we'll talk about primary keys and foreign keys and how they work and those sorts of things. For this example, we've just created an ID called car ID, and it's an integer. Okay, so that's all you need to know for the purpose of this video. Now, if I copy that SQL, now remember I've saved this as a .sql file so that I can go back and reference it later. You don't have to do that. You could type this straight into MAMP. So I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to go to MAMP. I'm going to make sure I'm on my cars database. I'm going to go to the SQL section at the top here. I'm going to paste my new code and I'm going to hit go, and it should go green and give me a new table, which it did. It's gone green here. Remember, if it goes red, you've got an issue. It's green, so it works. And I can see down on my left-hand side here, I've got a new table called owners. And if I click on that owners, I can see it's got ID, name, car ID. What it doesn't have is any data in here. So I want to add some data as well. So I'm going to go back to my brackets. Again, remember, you can pause the video, copy this all down. For the purpose of this, I'm going to keep moving on. I've created a second file here. And here I've got insert into owners. So in other words, put this data on the owners table, the name and the car ID. Now, we're actually manually putting in which car is linked to which person. Now, like I said, later on we'll get to foreign keys and how they all work, and it might be a bit different, but for the purpose of this, this is a great way to do that. So I'm going to highlight all of this code and go Command C. I'm going to go back into my SQL, and this time I make sure I'm on my owners table. I hit SQL, I paste my new section of code, and I hit go. And it's come up saying 5 rows inserted. And if I look at my owners thing now, I can say, okay, great, look, Alice owns car ID number 1. And you'll notice here, when I run my mouse over it, nothing happens. I can't click on the 1, or I can't click on the 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. That's where later in the program we talk about foreign keys, and what you would do is if you clicked on car 1, it would jump to the cars table and show you car 1 was a Toyota Corolla and so on and so forth. But like I said, we're not up to foreign keys yet at this stage. We're looking at CRUD. We're looking at how to get information from the two different tables and the AJ, the joins of the two tables. We'll get to keys later. Okay, so that's it. I've set my tables up. I've now got 2 tables in one database, and now I'm ready to start manipulating those databases, those tables. Right, now I've got down here, I've created 2 new files. One of them is called crud.php. Remember, we're using PHP, not HTML, because we have operations that have to run. It's not just a markup language. This is actually, there are functions that occur in here. So that's why we've got PHP. And I've got my CRUD.php here. Now, if we go back to the file that we used yesterday, the cars PHP on the previous video, you'll notice here, from here, PHP, it connects to the database, it checks the connection, and then it goes down into the insert data section here. Now, if I go to my CRUD file, it's exactly the same. It checks the connection, it connects to the database, it goes down, and we've got the add section in here, which will go to the file. So up to line 22, we're nearly exactly the same, right? It's nearly identical to the way the cars file was set up. Now, this is where it gets a bit different. When we get down here to the delete section, in the add section, remember, we're looking for the user to post information into the box to decide what's going to be added to the database. In this one here, we are using a get one. Instead of using a post function, we're using a get function. And essentially what this means is there'll be a table on the screen. And when there's a table on the screen, at the end of the table, there'll be 2 buttons. And one of those buttons will be a delete button. And it'll be lined up next to an ID number. So if you click the delete next to the ID number, it's going to go to the database, and here it's going to say delete from the cars table where the ID equals the ID that you've clicked on, the one that you want to delete. It's going to delete from there. So it's only 3 or 4 lines of code here, but that's going to allow you to delete from the database. Okay, and remember, we're looking at CRUD, right? So if we go back to here, we've added data. We know how to do that. Read we're going to get to later. Right now we're working on the delete one. This is removing data. Update we're going to do next, right? So let's go to here, and here is the update. Now the update is nearly exactly the same as the add function. It's nearly identically the same, except instead of having an add button, which comes in here, which is going to add the information, This one has an update button, and you click the update and you can change the things that are already in there. And again, this is the SQL saying update the cars instead of add to the cars table. This one just says update this information. Now, if we're going to update it, then essentially the user needs to be able to see that information first so they know what they're updating. You can't just go and say, go and update the brand or something if they don't know what the brand actually looks like. So down in our HTML, we need to display those tables. So we're going to go down here to the HTML. This add section, identical to the first file. None of that is different. That's exactly the same. There's a text box. The name of the text box is brand. Whatever you type in there gets added to the database. So I'm not going to go through all that again. Watch the last video. You'll understand that. Now, here's where we start to get a bit different. Update or delete. Now, what it's going to do, it's going to run a little bit of PHP query. It's going to select everything from the cars database. Absolutely everything. And again, we did this in our previous video when we were doing preview to show what was in the database. But in this situation, we're not just showing it, we're also showing it and allowing it to be changed or deleted. Okay, so it gets all of the results from this query, select everything from cars, saves them into a variable called $results, and then it draws out a table. Again, these are the headings of the table, and then it'll draw that out on your screen, on your website, with these are the headings, and then it'll fill out all the information underneath it, depending on how many rows you have in your database. Now, here's a little bit of a trick here. This thing's a little bit, well, it's a little bit different. This time, we're going to make sure that the ID is really obviously viewable, okay? So you'll make sure that every single row that you see, remember rows go across the page, every row that you see has the ID at the start of it. That's the very first thing. So you'll see the ID, and then you'll see the brand, the model, the year, the color, the type, the fuel, so on and so forth. And this draws the table. So this one here draws the headings, and this one here draws the table with all the information inside that table. And it's based on the results that came back from our search. And it'll go for the amount of rows of how many rows were in the database. But also at the end of that row, we're adding this little printout. And remember I said to you, echo is the same as printing on a web page, right? It's like printing onto the screen. And we're adding two buttons here. One of them is going to be an update button, which means if you click the update button, the name update gets triggered and it goes up to here to the PHP up here, and it does this set of information. It updates or modifies your database. The second button that's going to be here is going to be the delete one. And this is really important because the delete one also takes the information of which ID, which row the ID is, it gets that ID number. And that's super important because you don't want to delete the wrong row. You want to make sure you delete the right row. So this delete button also collects the ID number from here. Now, if this button is clicked, this delete button is clicked, then it goes up to the top here and it runs this code here and it gets that information. So instead of adding information or putting something in, this one goes through and gets that information, and the action's going to be delete from cars where the ID equals the ID that was selected. Now I think probably the best thing to do here is to preview this for you to show you how this page works. And we're going to just preview the crud.php one first. Now, if I go back to my map, I go back to here. Remember, we go to my website. I put it in a folder called cars. So I'll just put /cars. And that'll take me to my first page. Now, my first page, remember, is called cars.php. Now, I'm going to change this to CRUD. So I'm changing it in the taskbar at the top, crud.php, and I hit enter. Now you'll see what I mean. If we were going to add a car, that's exactly the same as it was on the previous page. With an add button, you could add information. So this section here is what's different. We've got this all cars update or delete table. And here you can see all of the ID numbers are in there, and then all of the information that comes from the database comes across. The brand, the model, the year, the color, those sorts of things. But then here we have two different actions for each ID. So for example, if I wanted to delete ID number 1, I would click the delete button, and that would be the get function in the code that we just looked at, and that would get that delete information. It would get the ID number 1, go and get that ID number 1, and then it would delete it from the database. If I wanted to update it, I could click on one of these and I could change this. Maybe I'll change this to a 4x4. Oops, sorry, 4x4. And then I could click the update button and it would update that information. Now, if I go back and check that on my database, if I go back to my cars table, you'll see it's now updated and it is a 4x4, a Toyota Corolla 4x4. So that is how this file works. It works based on an update and a delete and an adding, and essentially all of this is a preview. So if we go back to our Word document, talked about the key aspects of database concepts and manipulation, the CRUD, we've actually just done all 4 of those on one page. We've got our create, where we can add data. We've got our review or view the data on the screen. We can update or modify it, and we can delete it. Now we're going to move on to the next 2, the aggregation and join. And what I've done is I've created another file here in Python, in brackets, and I've called this one reports.php. Now this is a completely different layout, so we need to go through this one step by step. Okay, so for the purpose of this example, this is our connection to the network to make sure that we're connecting to the database. It's the same as we used in the CRUD one. It's similar, not exactly the same, but similar to the cars one. What is different is we're not listing what localhost root, see how they're immediately in there. On the previous cars connection, we created a variable for these first, right? Whereas this one, it automatically puts the 4 values in there straight away. So that's connecting to our database. Then we've got an HTML file straight away. So there's no extra PHP in here. We're going straight into an HTML file. And we've got our heading, total cars. Now, this is going to be a count. We're going to use this one as a count. So if we go back to our aggregation, I'm using the count one here. That's the one that I'm looking at to start with as a count. It's one of the different things. Now, a count could be count how many cars are in the database. Count how many red cars are in the database. Count how many 4x4s are in the database. Count how many whatever, how many cars. Find the average years of all the cars that were in. So this is getting the data and manipulating, I suppose, that data. Not manipulating, surveying the data to find out information. Essentially, that's what it is here, right? So in this one, we're doing a count. So select count everything as total from cars. So in other words, it's going to go to the database, it's going to go select everything and count how much of everything is there, find that answer, and then let's put it in as the total amount of cars. So this is actually one to count how many cars are in the database. That's the first one. The second one is going to count the brands of cars. How many different brands are there? It'll tell you how many different brands there are of cars. So that's going to be our second little section of PHP. And you'll see it's got a heading here, and then you've got your little bit of PHP code in here, and actually inside that little bit of PHP code, it kind of does all the work for you, and the echo prints it out on the screen, right? So that puts it, the echo is like, I've said this before, like a printout on the screen. The next one is a fuel count. It's going to count which cars have which. So is petrol the most amount of fuel? Is diesel the most amount of fuel? Is, I don't know, electric the most amount of fuel? So it tells you which type and how many. And this one here, again, will tell you which brand and how many. The next one, the average year. It'll tell you, it prints out on the board, the average year is, and then it gives you the average year. And you'll see we've changed here from average, we've changed it to count. We've changed it here from count to average so that it works out the average from the database. Okay, so that's it for our aggregation ones up to there, the average section. Now we're going to move down into our join one. Now our join one has a longer piece of SQL code, a longer query that we're going to be putting forward. And essentially this query says, select from the cars table the brand, from the cars table the model, from the owners table the name, from cars, so essentially from the cars overall, join with the owners, so from the cars table, join with the owners table on the cars ID, where it's the same as the owners dot cars ID. So that can be a little bit complicated, so I'll try and explain that. On the cars table, there is an ID and it has a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it might be. On the owners table, there is a car ID which has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever that we manually entered in. So it's saying wherever you find, say, the number 1 there, match it with the number 1 on this table and print out that information from that table. So in other words, if the two numbers match, then get the brand and the model and the owner's name and print it all out and put it up on the screen. So that can be complicated. We're taking information from two different tables, we're joining it together, and the join is based on the ID from the cars table and the car ID from the owner's table. Then put all the results into a variable called results. Then same thing, we're going to go through and we're going to print out a table based on those results. So the table will be amount of rows based on how much comes back from the query. It'll get the results, which should be brand, model, and owner's name, and it'll put the three of those things down all into one row. If it finds no information, it'll come back with no joined data. Okay, now I've gone through that pretty quickly. What you would need to do is to pause the video. You could do one section at a time, so do a connection and then do maybe just total cars and then run it and see what happens. Then you could add the cars and brands and run it and see what happens. And then you could add the fuel, run it, see what happens. Then you could go through average year and then finally do the joins and run it and see what happens. I'm going to show you the whole total overall package right now, so you can see what this page does. Because remember, this is only a short video. You can always pause and rewind, pause and rewind. Right. So I've called this one reports.php. So if I go back to here, I'm going to change my file up here. Instead of being crud.php, I'm going to change it to reports.php. And I hit enter. And now you'll see this is completely different. It did total cars and counted the total number of cars in my database. It did cars by brand and tells me each brand of the car and how many of each. It's got the cars by fuel, so which one has the most fuel. Obviously petrol's got the most fuel, it's got 4 there. The average year of the car, 2001. So if we go back and look at the other years, I know there's a 1969 car in there, I think there's a 64 car in there, and then a few over 2000, so it's obviously found out the average. And this is the interesting one, the join the car owners, cars by cars and owners. So the Toyota Corolla is owned by Alice. The Tesla Model 3 owned by Bob. So let's check one of those. Let's check the third one. Mercedes-Benz 220 SB owned by Nick. So let's go back to our database and see if we manually check that. If I go to cars, the Mercedes-Benz 220 SB has an ID number of 3. So now if I go to the owners, I can see Nick had the car ID of 3, so therefore that was correct. This person, Nick right here, owned that Mercedes-Benz, that car. And we can check them all. Alice owned car number 1, Bob owned car number 2. So Alice owned the Toyota, Bob owned the Tesla. If we go back to here, Alice owned the Toyota, Bob owned the Tesla. So that works. So this is an output page showing you aggregation here and then joins here. This is something that you're going to have to do a few times to get really used to it and get to see how it works and those sorts of things. Now the final thing that we need to do, because it's a bit annoying, is the heading here. You can't go up each time and change the pages up here. That's not the most efficient way to work. So what I did is I created a little file here as well called carheaders.html, which essentially just has 3 buttons. One goes to cars.php, one goes to crud.php, and one goes to reports.php. They're buttons at the top of the page that jump you to the 3 different pages. HR is a horizontal line across your whole page, right? Horizontal rule. So if I copy that little section of code, I just go Command C. I'm going to go to my CRUD page and I'm going to find the first bit of HTML. So the first time I see where it says body, which is there, body, I'm going to go in, I'm going to paste this in here, this section. Command V, paste that in there. So I've pasted, that essentially is my header. Command S to save it. I'm going to go to the reports section. I'm going to do the same thing. The first time I see body, which is right there, I'm going to paste it in there, save that, and I'll go back to my cars one and I'll do the same thing for my cars one so we can jump through. I go to the body and I paste right there. So I've now put the header and I have to save them. And remember, in brackets, if you haven't saved it, they'll have a little dot next to them here, but I've just saved the 3 of those. So now if I go back and preview in my actual web page, in my MAMP web page, if I go to here and I hit refresh, now I've got these 3 buttons across the top. And if I click on cars, I should go to that first page. There it is. I'm on my cars page and I've got the 3 buttons. If I go to CRUD, I go to my CRUD page. If I go to report, I go to my report page. So essentially, this is just like a menu bar at the top of your web page that jumps you from one to another. We can change the styling, you can change the look, you can change everything. We can do that later. But this just helps with the layout and us jumping around and moving around quickly. So that file's there as well. Again, if you need to copy any of these, you pause the video, watch this little bit of file, find the body section and paste it right at the very top of the body section, and the HR is your horizontal rule across. Right, there is a lot in this video, so I suggest you watch it a couple of times or you pause and go back over it so that you can work out the very, very important rules of CRUD and AJ. Right, CRUD, AJ, they are the key concepts. If we're talking about your internal assessment for IB computer science and you have a database attached to the back end of either a website or an application, a Python application, you must address all 6 of these. If you don't, you're going to lose marks. You'll be a 4 student instead of being a 6 or a 7 student.